Welcome to Grant's Rock Warehouse, and tonight I want to welcome Stephen Schnee and John Borack to the channel. We are going to do a general discussion on power pop. So we want to hear from you in the chat. Let's do it.
Grant is changing the world one track at a time on Grant's Rock Warehouse.
Welcome to Grant's Rock Warehouse, and tonight I want to welcome Stephen Schnee and John Borack here tonight. We've seen these gentlemen before, but tonight we're back. What did I say?
No. I was just letting people know that's the other guy that isn't you and me, Schnee. The other guy is John Borack.
Yeah, I said that.
So
yeah,
I assume we're starting over again, right?
Nope. No, not me and Grant.
He's just screwing with me. He's just screwing with me. But anyway, John Borack's here, ladies and gentlemen. Anyway, and Schnee.
Well, I hate to interrupt. I love to interrupt you, but John Borack is a musician and he's an author. And he's an expert on the world of power pop. And he has the Shake Some Action book. I'm always advertising this book. One of these days, I will read it.
If you put it in your bathroom, I've heard it's a good bathroom book.
Yeah.
I just had to show that since this was sitting here.
So I know you were there a lot.
So anyway.
2 chapters in one sitting.
Yeah.
At least.
Schnee suggested this would be a good discussion. So go ahead, Schnee. Start us off.
I mean, the thing is you had originally brought up the idea of talking about the Knack. And of course, the Knack is probably the most well-known of the power pop bands, the most commercially successful of the power pop bands.
100%.
But I have to be honest, when I think of the LA power pop scene, I have to be reminded of the Knack. Because the Knack were born in the LA power pop scene. But when the Knack got big, they were just everywhere. So they didn't seem part of LA anymore, even though they were. It was the other bands that really kind of brought the scene together, that held the scene together. We're talking bands like 2020, the Plimsolls. Yeah, he has the shirt. Bands like that. And plus, there were a lot of other bands that were sort of, I don't want to say power pop adjacent, although everybody knows that I always call everybody power pop adjacent, but there were still some bands from the LA scene that were incredible, that were part of the scene, that weren't exactly power pop, like Jules and the Polar Bears, fronted by Jules Shear. One of my favorite bands to come from that era, the Bus Boys, another great pop band that came from that era, but they aren't lumped in with the power pop thing, although they played with all those bands. And they weren't exactly power pop, but they were as melodic as the power pop thing. So hearing all this stuff as it was coming out, it was so exciting. It was just, I enjoyed punk, but I think like John, and maybe like you, we were raised on like the Beatles, the Monkees, the more melodic side. The punk energy was really, really exciting. But add hooks and melodies to that, and you got, some people call it new wave, but there were a lot of bands that were under this umbrella called power pop. And I'll let John start talking now because I've already taken up 22 minutes of everybody's time.
But it only seemed like 21, really.
Yeah. Thank you.
When Schnee starts yapping, I just kind of drift off and start doing calculus in my mind.
Well, first of all, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. I'll always love to talk about music and always love to chat with Steve and you as well, Grant. It's a lot of fun. I really enjoyed the last time I was on.
We had a lot of fun.
John and I will be seeing each other in 2 days and in 3 days. We're going to be hanging out for the weekend.
One of those power pop bands that Steve talked about is going to be playing a show out here in California. That is 2020. And so we're very excited about that because they haven't done a show in 25, 26, 27 years, something like that, Steve, right?
Yes. The last time they were supposed to do a show, they were going to play, I believe it was the Whiskey, in 2020. So they were going to be celebrating 2020 in 2020. What happened was COVID.
Yeah.
So, John, before I let you continue, and Steve contacted me and said, hey, look, we're not going to be able to do a show out there. You want to do an interview that we can play on our channel, which is, the 2020 YouTube channel, and we'll play it on the 20th, April or whatever
day it was.
Yeah. And so we did the interview. It was the first time I did any type of Zoom interview, and that was the start of my Beach Blanket Fort Bingo series. I mean, it wasn't Beach Blanket Fort Bingo, but it gave me the confidence. So 2020 started my interviews on my show. Anyway, go ahead, John.
No, so we're excited about that show. I think the last time they've been here in California to play was 1998 at the first International Pop Overthrow Festival.
Yep.
And they played in Steve's hometown,
Mhm.
Garden Grove, California, as a matter of fact. Outdoor show at a place called the Festival Amphitheater. It was about 110 degrees that day.
Yes.
Oh
Yes.
my God, that was awful. But the music was great. It was the most amazing bill I think IPO has ever seen. There was 2020. There was Chris Dorn from the Beatifics, Paul Myers, who some of you might know as Brother Mike. He was on Saturday Night Live, but Paul's a great writer and a pop songwriter and singer.
I did not know that.
He was in the
all right.
Wonderberries? No,
No,
the
Gravelberries.
Gravelberries, and they have a song called I Wonder What She's
Wonder Where You Are Tonight.
Yeah.
It's a wonderful song.
Sorry,
so
Paul.
I want you to go listen to that right now.
Yeah.
He also did an album about 5 years ago with a guy named John Mormon, who lives up in San Francisco, which is where Paul is now, too. That was really great as well. But also on that bill, Bill Lloyd, the late Jeffrey Foskett, who was just a wonderful Beach Boys influenced singer-songwriter and actually toured with the Beach Boys for several years. And let's see who else. Kyle Vincent.
Yes.
And a great pop band called The Sun Sawed in Half.
Yes. Yes. They were on Not
An
Lame.
amazing day. The music was wonderful. 2020, just everyone loved them. So looking forward to Saturday night. It's going to be really, really special seeing those guys again. And yeah, they were one of the kingpins of the LA power pop scene. Then you had other bands like the Knack, like Steve mentioned, who did a lot of club dates around here before they kind of exploded with Get the Knack, and just became really, really popular in the clubs. And they played shows with 2020. They played shows with The Beat. I think Steve's got that T-shirt on, right? You're wearing your Beat T-shirt. Yeah.
Yep.
100%.
As Paul Collins Beat, who some of them were from San Francisco. Paul was from San Francisco, but I think they're more known as an LA band. Really.
Yeah. Yeah.
And of course the Plimsolls with Peter Case, and just so many under the radar bands too. And then after the Knack hit, and had the #1 song with My Sharona, then all the record label geniuses thought we should sign every pop band ever who even sounds remotely like the Knack, or who has a "the" in front of their name. And then you had all kinds of bands. Some of them were horrible, but a lot of them were really, really good. Bands like the Scooters, Tricks. Many other great bands.
The thing about I'm lagging. The thing about
in more than one way.
The thing about the Scooters, I love the Scooters. I was a huge fan of the Scooters. Larry Lee was one of the two main singer-songwriters. And he came from a duo called Peach and Lee, who I didn't even know existed until years later. The Scooters had 2 albums out on EMI, both produced by Phil Wainman, who had produced a lot of people, including Bay City Roller stuff. There's a lot of interest in all these bands, Yeah,
a lot of them were kind of looked down upon at the time as sort of Knack knockoffs, but the passage of time has really allowed people to see there were a lot of great songs there, and a lot of great artists that really did fly under the radar, or kind of got lumped into that big, oh, they sound like the Knack, so they suck sort of bucket that happened when the whole Knacklash thing happened.
Yeah.
When the Knack kind of
Nuke the Knack.
But why did that whole Nuke the Knack thing start? What do you guys remember?
Well, I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, Steve, or if you think differently, part of it was they were just so popular, and they got so popular seemingly out of nowhere, although it wasn't really out of nowhere. Doug Feiger had been in a band called Sky, who had a major label deal, 5 years before that. But Doug Feiger was also a very arrogant gentleman, and I think that sort of pissed people off.
And they wouldn't do interviews either.
Right. And so, they kind of thought they were above everything. I think that's what he thought. And add that to the fact that they were just so popular, and some of their lyrics were a little bit racy, and I think that's kind of why the whole Nuke the Knack thing started, honestly.
Yeah.
I mean, the music industry is more so than any other entertainment industry. It's created to build artists up and knock them down to make way for the next group of artists. And I think the Knack fell victim to that as well. I think the industry supported them, and The interesting thing is okay, Get the Knack came out. I had never even heard of the band. Now, I was paying attention to the lot of stuff that was going on, but the Knack was not a band that I remember seeing in BAM magazine in the concert listings or in the LA Times calendar in concert listings. If they were listed there, they weren't, they were just another LA band. I mean, I don't remember seeing Jules and the Polar Bears listed there, or maybe I saw the Plimsolls and 2020 on occasion. Maybe I even saw The Last, which sort of came out of the punk scene, but were really great pop band. And I think what happened is, as John said, they just got really big really fast. It's like the album came out, My Sharona came out, and it was like instantaneous fame.
Yeah.
But they had been playing the clubs. It's not like they formed, what's the guy who does all those stupid talent shows, Simon something or other from
Simon Cowell.
Yeah, Simon Cowell. It's not like Simon Cowell threw together this band. Doug and Burton had been writing songs together for a while. There was a compilation of demos that had come out later. And it's really, really, if you listen to that, they had the Knack sound down 3 years before the Knack came out.
Sure.
Maybe 4 years or 5 years, but the demos on that thing were very similar to what the Knack ended up sounding like.
Another issue, Steve, that I just thought of, I think a lot of people were really put off by the Beatle comparisons.
Yes.
And Capitol Records really played that up because, of course, Capitol was the Beatles label. Now it's the Knack's label.
Mm-hmm.
Meet the Beatles, get the Knack. And then the orange and yellow swirl record label, that's what they used.
No, the rainbow label.
Yeah, it was the rainbow label.
But did you know, John, that they went and those original rainbow labels that they had from the 60s that they had left over, that they brought them back out? Yeah, they didn't have to print any.
Wow.
They might have had to eventually.
A lot
but
of
those
people
are
really
original.
Wow. But yeah, I think so many people got offended too by the Beatles comparisons and it just kind of, and I think Capitol really dropped the ball when the second album came out, but the Little Girls Understand. The first two songs they released as singles were probably the two worst songs on that album they could have released as singles. One was Baby Talks Dirty, which was basically a rewrite of My Sharona.
Yeah, terrible. I can't stand it.
I love that song.
And the other one was a great song, Can't Put a Price on Love, but it was basically a rewritten version of Beast of Burden by the Stones.
Yes.
But I can't see that as being a single.
No, it was. It was a second
I know,
single.
but
There's
I just
so many
don't.
other great songs. Yeah. Well, Capitol Records has a history of screwing things up like that. They put out some John Lennon singles that I thought, why did they do that? There's Woman is the of the world. Why would you release that as a single? It's not even a good song.
Yeah.
And then there was a track on George Harrison's Living in the Material World album, Don't Let Me Wait Too Long. Wonderful song. Should have been the second single. They pressed it up. They never released it. So Capitol has a history of kind of fumbling things a little bit. And that didn't really help them either.
And I get it that they would push them like, the next, I don't know if they ever really said it, but they implied that they were the next Beatles, so to speak. And I think that really was detrimental because, the Beatles had only been broken up for 9 years. The wounds are still fresh. And to have a band come along and have them being portrayed as though they were,
any next artist is going to fail. Anybody who they called the next Beatles, anybody, look at somebody as talented, in my opinion, as Steve Forbert. They called him the next Dylan, right?
Didn't work.
That hurt him commercially, although he's still a recording artist today. An artist like that, but it was so weird that a label like Capitol would say, oh my gosh, the Knack, we have to go out and sign more bands like that. So they signed bands like from New York, the Electrics, which I love the Electrics, but they didn't sound like the Knack, but they had the in front of their name.
Yeah.
And
then I think the whole power pop Knack association hurt bands like The Beat and 2020 because they were seen as jumping on this train that they weren't really jumping on. They were already on the train. They had been doing this for 2 or 3 years in the clubs. 2020 had already released a single on Bomp Records. Souls had already been around for a while, but it's just easy to throw people into one big pile and say, "Oh, they're power pop, they're copycats. Forget them."
I mean,
it was the press that was jumping on the power pop train.
Right.
The bands were already there.
There had to be bands that were signed prior to the Knack, though. I mean, they really did start it. They were the one that had the most success, right? I mean, did Shoes have an album? They had albums out before that.
Right. But you see, the thing is power pop was a thing, but I don't think it was a well-known thing.
Right.
The Knack brought attention to that genre. So then people, how I say the label started signing every band who had "the" in front of their name,
right?
Assuming they were power pop. But then everybody else started assuming everybody that had "the" in front of their name was power pop. So you'd get the Dickies from LA, a great LA band, but certainly not power pop, not even close. Yeah. Great tunes, great melodies. Maybe, in fact, they did on one of their albums, I think the Hair That Bit Us or something, they did a Knack cover. Let Me Out, I think.
What was the debut? Was it The Incredible Shrinking Dickies? I can't remember.
Yes.
That was the first record. Okay.
Yeah, that was on A&M when it came out.
Yeah, Incredible Shrinking Dickies and then Dawn of the Dickies were both on A&M. Both really good records, too. Really good.
I'd never, ever got into the Dickies.
Great tunes. At first, I don't think I got into we're talking about the Dickies now because they're LA, and this is...
That's all right. We can talk Dickies.
Happening the same time as the Knack.
Mm-hmm.
And this was a band that I think people thought they were... they were goofy.
Oh, yeah.
And people thought they were kind of like a joke band, maybe making fun of punk or parodying punk. But no, they were just out there having fun. There was a song called "If Stewart Could Talk," and that's the name that Leonard gave his wee wee, if you know what I mean.
Oh my goodness!
If you're picking up what I'm laying down,
I'm picking up what you're laying down.
I'm not going to pick up what you're laying down.
Well, I don't want to touch it, but I understand what you're saying.
But there were so many good bands that were independent labels. Bomp signed stuff. Stiv Bators went to LA for a little while. And he got signed to Bomp, and during that period in LA, he was making power pop records, even though Stiv was not New York. I think it was like Cleveland or Chicago.
Yeah. Stiv, he was Cleveland because the Dead Boys were from Cleveland.
Yeah. So there was that period in his career where he was sort of fashioning himself more of a power pop garage guy as opposed to a punk guy. And that was between the Dead Boys and Lords of the New Church.
Right. Yeah, so many great songs around that time, and then the independent labels started to spring up, like Titan Records out of Missouri. And actually, you were mentioning Peach and Lee earlier. Arliss Peach had singles on Titan Records after Peach and Lee did a lot of their stuff in the 70s. Very raspberry sounding stuff. So there were a lot of indie labels, Bomp and Titan and other labels like that, just putting this stuff out. And I don't know. I just think as far as mainstream popularity, it just never got there. But you can't. Who's to say what's going to be popular? Good stuff is very rarely popular anymore. And
who's to say what's going to be power popular?
Yeah, right.
Yeah,
right. But to sort of piggyback on what John was saying, a lot of these bands had devoted audiences, and here it is. I should have wrote these band names down. There were, apart from, like I said earlier, Jules and the Polar Bears, not power pop, but just one of the most unique bands. But they were born from this. They probably played gigs with 2020 and things like that. I think that they would fit more with 2020 than they would fit with like the Plugs or the Germs or bands like that. There's a lot of great punk bands that came from the era too LA is known for its punk scene, and they're only, it's only like music fans who are really in deep with the power pop stuff. And I think John knows this, is a lot of the power pop bands, because, as John said, it was a big thing for a while, 79, 80, 81 or whatever. But then it started kind of petering off a little bit as harder rock bands came into LA and new wave became more popular. And then it was kind of tough to be a power pop band because not many people were buying power pop. I mean, a great band like Fool's Face from the Midwest, they had to put out, the records on their own, and they put out like 4 or 5 great records. And now when you talk to anybody, and I'm talking about the Rubinoos, Shoes, anybody like this, I'm not putting words in their mouth, but they're not going to come out and say, yeah, we're a power pop band, because all these bands are more than that. Power pop is kind of the core of what they are, or what a lot of these people are. But underneath that, you're going to hear blues, soul, R&B. If you listen to some of John Rubin's vocals on some of the first couple of Rubinoos albums, which was a Bay Area power pop band, so kind of a sister city, he's got a lot of soul in his voice. And a lot of things come from his love of soul music, although their music is very pop.
Same with the Plimsouls. A lot of rhythm and blues influences. They covered, a Wilson Pickett song, I think, on their first album, and used to do a lot of R&B covers in their live shows. And Peter Case just had the perfect voice for it. But there was always that pop sensibility behind everything that they did. And by pop sensibility, I mean a 3-minute song with a catchy verse and a catchy chorus and some great vocal harmonies.
Yeah.
And these guys all knew how to write songs, but yeah, like Steve said, the term power pop became like an albatross after a while, because people didn't want to be known as power pop. I don't want to be called power pop. That's the knack. That's bad. My career is going to go right in the toilet if you call me power pop. I remember Marshall Crenshaw for a while hated being called power pop. And I interviewed him, and I said, why don't you like the term? And he said, because so much power pop now is ultra white caca.
What
did he wasn't wrong. A lot of it was at the time.
But wasn't he compared to, when he came out, wasn't everybody comparing him to Buddy Holly? And that might have been a bad thing to do, too.
Yeah, Buddy Holly and the Beatles. I mean, he
played Buddy Holly in the Bomba. Yeah.
He embraced his Buddy Holliness.
Yeah.
Yeah, he played Buddy Holly, and then he played John Lennon in Beatlemania, and then he covered a song the Beatles did at the BBC, a great song called Soldier of Love.
On
his first album, copied the Beatles arrangement note for note, and it was wonderful. It's just a great thing, but he didn't really want to be known as power pop at the time. Now, I think it's a little bit different. It's kind of come back around where people don't get offended if you call them power pop anymore. If you're writing about them.
A lot of these bands, though, it really isn't fair to call them all power pop because, like Schnee has trained me. I've learned so much from Steve and his teachings.
Yes.
That there are power pop tendencies in all of them, like the Knack. Yes, there's power pop on it, but the Knack were way more than just power pop.
Oh, yeah.
And all these bands, they couldn't do a whole album none of the albums are all power pop.
There are very few albums that are power pop from start to finish. Maybe the first Beat album.
Okay.
Maybe
I'd give you the first. Yeah.
Maybe the first 2020 album. Maybe the first Knack album. I mean, Let Me Out is almost close to punk, really, but
God, that is a great song, though.
Those are the three that come to mind. Power pop from start to finish. So when I wrote, in my book, the top 200 power pop albums, it's not power pop from track 1 to track 12. It's albums that sort of have those pop tendencies.
But Frustrated's not power pop.
I don't know. It's got that riff, and it's got those harmonies. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's got a lot of power in it. And the funny thing is, a lot of power pop, or what people consider power pop, doesn't have a lot of power in it. Someone like Emmett Rhodes was really, he was always considered power pop, but the stuff wasn't powerful at all.
I never thought of Emmett Rhodes as power pop at all.
Yeah, but people talk about him in that genre.
Like he's one of the, I don't think that Todd Rundgren's power pop. Todd Rundgren is more rock, more soul.
But I
There's
saw
a
the
huge
light.
part of power pop.
I think I saw the lights power pop.
Oh, I saw the light. Couldn't I just tell you? And it's funny. I was going to mention that earlier. I think 1978, Rundgren was on the Mike Douglas show with Utopia, and they played "Couldn't I Just Tell You," and he introduced it by saying something along the lines of, "Here's a song that's part of a new musical trend called power pop," and he said it with kind of in that kind of Rundgren drawl, with kind of a little bit of disdain in his voice. But
yeah,
they played "Couldn't I Just Tell You," which is a great power pop song.
Yeah. You know, the thing about power pop is it really is a genre that has been mangled beyond belief. Now, before I get into that, there are things that I don't consider pure or power pop. The Knack I consider almost pure power pop. I don't think of My Sharona as a power pop song. It's very different. It has one of the most amazing, just an incredible guitar solo by Burton Avere. The band plays well, but compare that to Good Girls Don't and Let Me Out, stuff like that.
Just another lousy day in paradise.
I know, but I'm just talking about the first album. That third album is not power pop at all. I mean,
well, what I'm saying is,
not as a full.
Some of these bands are able to have a career and do more than a couple of records.
Yeah.
They're bound to get out of that whole power pop type of, but they're still classified as power pop. Once you're in it, you cannot become declassified as that.
It's like the Hotel California. You can check out anytime you like, but you can never leave.
100%.
Yeah. But see, here's the thing about bands like this is you're looking, and this is any genre. This is the Stranglers. The first 3 Stranglers albums were very punky. Mm-hmm. Like, the Doors on steroids or something, with the Doors, Ray Manzarek type keyboards and this really heavy thumping bass, and Hugh Cornwell's growl and J.J. Brunello as well. And then you get 3-4 albums later, and you're listening to things that are more keyboard dominated. They've slowed things down. JJ's turned his bass from 11 to 8, and they're changing. So you've got people complaining that they're changing. And then, but if they didn't change, you'd have people complaining that they weren't changing.
You can't win, basically. Yeah.
And with power pop, you've got the people saying, "Oh, I love their first album." After that, when they added that piano player or whatever, I'm talking about just any band, not the Stranglers now. But like, you just add an instrument or take away an instrument or whatever, and all of a sudden people are like, well, they're not as good as their first album. And it's like, well, they've put out 17 albums since then, know. But like, my thing about the Plimsouls, I think the Plimsouls were erroneously slotted into the power pop category because I think they're a great rock and roll band, a great rock and soul band with some of the greatest. I think Now by the Plimsouls is one of the greatest power pop singles of all time.
Now, 0 Hour is
incredible. Absolutely incredible. But they're more of a rock and soul band.
I think what it comes down to is power pop is a song medium, not an album medium.
Right.
You can call albums power pop albums, and that's like I said, if they're power pop adjacent, to use Steve's term, or if they have 2 or 3 great power pop songs on them. It never deviates too far from the pop realm,
right?
But
part of the same pie.
It's definitely more of a song medium, unless it's someone like 2020 or The Beat, because both of those debut albums, pretty much power pop straight through. One ballad on the Beat album, ballad on the first 2020 album. Otherwise, power pop all the way through, and they're both wonderful.
Yeah. But look at the Raspberries. The Raspberries are considered one of the greatest power pop bands of all time. Go All the Way. All these great songs. But there's also ballads, too. Mm-hmm. I don't think that any Raspberries album is a solid power pop album.
No. Well,
they're solid albums. They're solid albums, but not power pop.
I agree.
And what happens there is when you get different songwriters in the mix.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You got Wally
Eric
Bryson.
Carmen, who would write all the power pop stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Dave Smalley in Raspberries, who was country.
Mm-hmm.
Wally Bryson, who really wanted to be in Free or Bad Company.
Mm-hmm.
So those were his influences. And same with Badfinger. A lot of Joey Mullen's songs weren't necessarily power pop.
They were meat and potatoes,
Right.
at least on the first couple albums that he was on. But then he broke off into like Sweet Tuesday Morning and things like that. But never really, Joey didn't really seem to be power pop until maybe a little bit on Wish You Were Here.
Yeah.
And I will tell you that I think the most solid power pop album by Badfinger is Say No More from 1981, 82.
Yeah.
That is the most.
Has Love Is Gonna Come at Last on it.
That's the one that has Airwaves.
Oh, okay.
Or no, I'm sorry, that's Airwaves. Say No More is the one that has Hold On, Three Time Loser. That album is like solid, no ballads. It's just Joey and Tommy trading off with some great melodic rockers. And I think that's the most consistently power pop album that Badfinger ever did. Am I saying it's the best album? No. Am I saying, Wish You Here's my favorite album of all time. It's got power pop moments, but it's not all power pop. Same with Straight Up, Say No More, No Dice. But then you have Ass, which is like no power pop. Maybe Apple of My Eye.
That'd be the closest thing.
Yeah.
And same with the Knack. The later they got in their career, the power pop sort of went away on Round Trip, and then when they reformed for the 1987 record.
Well, they were like metal.
Oh, yeah, Round Trip.
More of a rock album. And
Round Trip, Doug Hare with the long hair, and Doug Flagger with the long hair.
What the hell? When that came out, big Knack fan, and I was thinking, oh my God, look, they're gonna, come back and produce something that's hopefully as good as what came before. And I'm listened to it, and I heard those crunchy guitars, and my face, I probably damn near passed out.
Yeah, that was an album.
That's not what I wanted.
I think it was one of those things where, they think we're wimps. They think we sound like the Beatles. We'll show them. We're gonna rock out, man.
My hair is down to my shoulders, and I can do this, and I can wear a headband on stage.
What did you guys think when that first came out?
I was absolute disappointment. I felt. Now I really like a lot of the songs, but it's three of the guys from the Knack, at least,
well, Bruce Gary they were playing gigs with him, and then he and Doug had issues, but he was a part of it originally.
One of the greatest drummers ever in any genre is Bruce Gary. Guy was amazing. If you listen to the drums on Get the Knack, they got a great drum sound. Mike Chapman got a great drum sound for him, and just some of the stuff he's playing, and the way the way I gauge that is if I try to play those songs, I'm thinking, how did he do that? And just so much incredible stuff. He was just an amazing force behind the drum kit.
Yeah, see, that's the same way I felt about Doug Heading. How does he do that? And then a pigeon appears.
It's magic, Steve.
It's magic.
Ho ho, yeah, exactly. Ho. See, I remember once going to a gig, one of the IPOs or Poptopia, probably Poptopia because that was better. The thing about the thing about the show, and it could have been IPO. I'm just having fun. There was a show, and I think Scott McCarl played. It was almost like a super group, just a bunch of guys go up there. Maybe Scott McCarl, and Bruce Gary played drums. It was only for a couple songs, and it was pouring rain outside, is what I remember.
I was there.
Yeah. And then after the show,
the place was called the Dragonfly.
Okay, after the show, they walked off stage, and then Bruce Gary goes back up on stage, sits behind the kit, and just goes boom, 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 and then then that was it, and then put the sticks down and walked away. And it's like I saw Bruce Gary play the friggin' drum beat to My Sharona. It was just amazing. But there's still a power pop scene in LA, but it's
Sort of.
Sort of.
I mean, not really anymore. There's power pop bands, power pop acts, but there's not really a scene anymore.
When did the scene officially, end?
A couple years into IPO, I think, is when it fell apart.
Yeah, if
And I'm not
Year
playing
would that
IPO.
be? What,
if you listen to Robbie Rist, whom I know you guys both know,
Mhm.
it was the last Masticators show at the Galaxy Theater in Orange County, which I think was, I don't know what year it was.
Early 2000s, right?
2000,
Yeah.
something like 2001. Actually, it was 2001.
Okay.
That was Robbie's last gig with the band. That's when he says the pop scene just sort of died.
Mhm.
Yeah, the whole camaraderie and everyone for everyone else was sort of gone, unfortunately. And
That's sad.
people
Yeah.
get older and they have families or they have kids and they have day jobs and it just wasn't working. But people still release really great records out of the LA pop scene. There was one that just came out, a gentleman named Joe Giddings just released a great power pop record.
Yeah, I haven't heard it yet.
Yeah, very kind of Jellyfish Queen, but still a lot of power pop influence. There's someone like Rick Ramadka who's still doing stuff. And
Yeah, Rick Ramadka. He used to be in Maple Mars, Ruby Free, Double Knot Spies, a slew of great records, all going through the power pop history.
Hey, John, I know you just brought up Jellyfish, and now I this is the most Jellyfish-like thing that I've heard lately. The latest Guess Who album.
I
God, he's trying to peddle that thing.
No, I love this record. Have you heard this?
have not. I've heard it's
Go
good.
check it out. Go check. Okay, you're
They
assigned
hired him
tonight.
as their PR guy.
This is John. Don't listen to Schnee.
He never does.
Rarely
Go
do
listen to a song Across the Line. Off.
Write that down.
This is from 2023. Now, it's not the Guess Who, the drummer's the only one left, but you can listen to The King, Across the Lines, what I'd recommend starting with. But the whole album is fabulous.
Wrote it down.
Okay, what you got to do, John, is whenever Grant makes a suggestion to you, you grab your pen, right, and you go, I'm going to write it down right now, right? But really, you're just doing this. You're wiggling your pen. Okay, I'm writing it down. Okay, the Guess Who.
I wouldn't steer John. John, you like Jellyfish, correct?
I do. Yeah.
Okay, then just check this
I don't
out.
like them as much as some people, but I do like them, and I realize their importance sort of in the history of power pop. But there's another thing where Jellyfish really power pop. No,
I don't think so. I think there was something bigger and
tendencies,
fantastic.
A lot of
Yes.
tendencies, but they were more like Queen light. I don't know.
Yeah. Queen with
I-
snappy tunes.
Yeah, I got in trouble.
You
calling
mean
somebody-
Queen when they could write songs?
Well, yeah, with without all the bombastic.
Radio Gaga.
Well, I like
I-
Radio
Radio
Gaga.
Goo
I
Goo.
called
I love
somebody
it. I
Elvis
do.
Costello light once in a review that I wrote, and they got really, really mad at me.
Really?
Who was that?
Really,
Oh, no.
really mad at me. And then I went to their website, and they had all these reviews that compared him to Elvis Costello.
Yeah, but you used the word light. So.
Well, because he was lighter, then it wasn't. Well, whatever. Anyway,
Um,
Well, the whole
enough-
thing with
enough
Jellyfish,
about-
though.
enough
As,
about
you know-
Frank Bango. Anyway,
Well, the funny thing is because Jellyfish was such a of course, I think now people look back more fondly of Jellyfish than when they were out. Because, that, as far as I'm concerned, that was probably about the end of the line for that. And when they were doing that in the early 90s, man, they were going up against grunge and everything. They were doomed.
yeah.
Yeah.
But man, wouldn't you have liked to have seen what they could have done as a band if they would have progressed? Because Spilt Milk's brilliant. What if they would have kept going?
Yeah.
We'll never know.
So
but-
many bands, like that. What if the Knack would have kept going? Similar, track of their first two
Well,
albums.
Zoom's a great record.
Zoom is an amazing record. And
Round Trip, I think-
underrated.
My
Round
favorite.
Trip, I think, is incredible. That's
My
my favorite
favorite.
Knack album.
My favorite Knack album.
What if the Knack had continued?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Yeah,
This
but
is Knack
when
round trip
when
promo poster right there.
Awesome.
Right.
nice. Yeah,
Awesome.
when they came back with Zoom, I thought, wow, this is a great record. They hadn't lost a step. The only thing that bothered me was Terry Bozzio on the drums, and the drum sound that he got, which sounded like somebody in a high school marching band with a snare drum wound too tight. It just,
I didn't have a
Songs
problem
were
with Terry Bozzio's drums. I might have had a problem with the way they sounded.
right.
But whose fault is that? I don't know if that's Terry's fault or is that the engineer's fault? Is that the producer's fault?
Yes.
But I saw Terry Bozzio play with the Knack, and he was fabulous.
Oh, he's
He could
amazing.
play everything that, Bruce Gary could play. I mean, no
Yeah.
problem.
Sometimes, people can be great musicians, great drummers, but they're not the right drummer for the band. And I think of when Clem Burke joined the Ramones for about a week.
He'd be
Yeah.
awfully busy, wouldn't he?
Clem Burke is not a Ramones drummer.
Yeah.
What did he do? Just basically what he did in Blondie? I mean,
They never recorded anything. He just played live for I think it was literally less than a month. He was calling himself Elvis Ramone,
Yeah.
and then he just quit. He says it's not working. He was probably just getting tired of playing the 4/4 beat at 100 miles an hour. But
well, if you hear Marky play in on those Dust albums, you ever hear any of those Dust albums, John?
oh yeah,
He can really play.
oh yeah, yeah.
I mean, and he's just dumbing down to play Ramon stuff. But hey, a paycheck's a paycheck. But he's a really great drummer.
Yeah, he is.
Well,
and so was Clem also. So
Clem,
wow.
incredible.
He's Clem.
Just listen to any Blondie track.
I mean, if you listen, and it was funny because I was just talking about this on Saturday, a couple of days before he passed. I was talking about the song "Dreaming," which to me is his shining moment behind the drum kit.
Yeah, it's a monster.
It's like one long drum solo, just one big long drum solo. But it never seems like he's overshadowing Debbie Harry's vocals or anybody else in the band. It's just amazing.
Right.
And if you watch him play live video, it just seems so effortless.
Well, didn't Clem play on Cool Trash?
He played with the Ramones, played with the Plimsolls, played with
The
the
Romantics.
Tearaways, the Romantics.
Now I could see him playing in the Romantics.
Yeah, he played on their worst album. Unfortunately,
which one was that?
I think it's called something like 29 or 2149 or something like.
Yeah.
It was basically just a garage rock album.
I've never heard that.
Like no really good.
And not a very good one either.
Yeah, exactly. But see going back to the LA pop scene, it was so exciting because so many bands, major label, independent, and here I was thinking of all these bands, and now that you hit record, I can't think of any. But there's that one band. The Naughty Sweeties is another band.
Wait a minute, the Naughty Sweeties?
Yeah, the Naughty Sweeties.
Never heard of that, but I love the name.
Yeah. In fact, I transferred that from vinyl to. See, that's the whole thing. I transferred a lot of this stuff from vinyl to digital, so I have a lot of it in my own collection.
There was that one record that's on the one DIY comp of the Power Pop. Oh, it's the only track that I know that actually sounds great. It was digitized, and I cannot remember the name of the band, but I remember the band's on the front, but the background's kind of blue colored, and I think they were on RCA, and they only put out one record in 78, maybe?
It's not straight 8, is it? Like, I'm sorry. Oh, yeah.
God, I'd have to go pull it. I'll find it. Hold on. I'll get on Discogs.
The thing to me that was cool about the LA pop scene is that you had a lot of power pop bands, but none of them, or at least none of the big ones, sounded exactly alike. 2020, at least their records I'm talking about, 2020 had that little bit of keyboards and the really great production from Earl Yankee that really made that record. And the Plimsolls had kind of the rough and tumble R&B sort of slant to it. Paul Collins beat pure pop through and through. So they weren't all the same. They were all a little bit different. And I think that's what made that scene so special.
If you like the Pop was another great LA band.
Yeah.
In fact, the Pop had a song opening track on their first album, which is an independent. Now they put out an independent album. They put out an album on Arista, and then they put out an album or an EP on Rhino. Their original guitar player was Tim McGovern, who went on
Motels.
to join Motels, and then of course then he was also the main guy in Burning Sensations. But the very first song that I heard by the Pop, because I bought the album because the band's name was the Pop, even though the album cover didn't look like they were going to be pop. They looked like they was going to be experimental, like beep boop, new wave type stuff. Song called "You Ought to Know," and it's ended up on a couple compilations. It is absolutely one of my favorite songs of all time, but it
That's
doesn't
on the
sound
debut.
like, yeah, it's the first song on the debut.
Yeah.
Doesn't sound like the other bands we've been talking about, but this is a band that's considered power pop. The Twisters, they had an EP out on Rhino, and then they put out their own album independently. So many great bands, and a lot of them don't. You know, there were bands that were probably like blues bands or whatever, and then they go, "Hey, you know, if we put on these striped T-shirts, cut off sleeves, and cut our hair, then we'll, you know, we might be able to fit into, you know, new wave." But the thing is you forgot to tell them, power pop, no mustaches. So you see these bands up there and they're playing these songs or whatever, and like, you know, one guy would have a headband and a mustache, and you knew like a year ago that guy was playing in like a Foghat covers band, you know.
You know, a couple other people that come to mind that were really a great part of that scene. Jack Lee.
Oh yes.
Who was in the Nerves with Peter Case and Paul Collins, and then went solo. We had an album called Jack Lee's Greatest Hits. Then another one that came out in 1983 in France only. I think that was just called Jack Lee, I believe. Great stuff. And he wrote hits for Paul Young and
Come Back and Stay.
Blondie. He wrote Hanging on the Telephone, right?
Yeah, Hang on the Telephone. Yeah.
Telephone. And then someone who wasn't originally from California but spent a lot of time out here, Phil Seymour.
Oh yes.
Oh yeah, Phil.
A wonderful artist and did so much great stuff here in LA. And he would play a lot of live shows too once he split from Twilly and moved out to the Los Angeles area. And his first album is amazing. And then Phil Seymour 2, about half of it is pretty good.
I've
think
got
that
Phil Seymour too. I think I've got that. No,
Expanded?
it's the first one. I think I've got the first one. Came out on Collector's Choice.
yeah, but then it came out later on another label with a bunch of bonus tracks.
Yeah, I don't have.
But you know how I said that I feel that the Plimsolls Now is one of the greatest power pop singles ever, or one of the greatest power pop songs ever? I think that Phil Seymour's Baby It's You is right there next to it.
Yeah.
I mean, whatever I'm doing, I just hear it, you know. And then we're talking about a band called, or you know, I did a video a couple days ago, another LA band called The Last, and this was a band that was, when they first came out, they were kind of garagey punk, and then their album comes out and it's really poppy, and so they start losing their audience because it's just like, no, we want you guys to be punk, but they're such great songwriters. Let's focus on the songs. And their album LA Explosion changed the way that I listen to music. I mean, forever. And if you're interested, you can go. Well, I think John's going to eat some ice cream right now.
I'm looking for a CD, box set that I know you have, Steve. And Grant, you might have this too. Looking for the Magic.
Yeah.
Which has a lot of great stuff from the LA bands, and also some stuff that just makes you scratch your head and think, what the hell?
Why is it on there?
Why is Don't Fear the Reaper on a power pop collection?
Well, the third installment is the whole thing's a head scratcher.
I love the fact that it's so varied. I know it's supposed to be all power pop, but I absolutely, because I just want, there's so much great music on those compilations that I'm just happy they exist. Yeah, they're not really power pop as a whole, but yeah, I just like the fact that they exist.
Yeah, I mean, Jonathan Richman.
I know.
I don't get that.
And I think, you know, I heard an interview with the guy who put this together. What's his name? David Wells.
Mm-hmm.
And he also wrote the liner notes. And he said, well, we just couldn't license a lot of stuff. It's like, well, then make it 2 CDs and not 3.
Yeah.
Don't put stuff on there that really has no relation to power pop whatsoever. I mean, there's some things where you can say, well, the Car's my best friend's girl. Well, yeah, that might be, it might not be, but not Don't Fear the Reaper and not Jonathan Richman. There's just no way in hell either one of those.
Yeah, there's a compilation. Yeah, there's a compilation that just loaded into my system a couple days ago, and it was just sitting out here a little while ago, and now I can't find it. But it's one of the Rhino.
The DIY.
Yeah,
DIY. Yeah. I got it right up here. I got it looking at it.
yeah. Why don't you grab the one with like 2020 on the cover?
Well, I'm not going to grab it. I'm looking at it online.
Oh,
I can pop it. I can't pop it in here, but I know which one.
Yeah, those are really good compilations.
Yeah, there's two of them: American Power Pop 1 and Power Pop 2. And that's the comp that I thought had this band on there that you had, but I can't find it. It's not on this comp. It must be in another comp.
Maybe volume 2. But so much I should put together, I have a show. I have a couple shows on Mixcloud. This is Ski Lodge, Return of the Living 80s, and a show called This Is Pop. And sometimes, like This Is Pop, I'll usually put on stuff from the late 70s up to now and just mix it all together. Mm-hmm. But I do have sometimes I have, like, if I'm really jonesing to just hear a collection of British power pop, then I'll do that. Or punky power pop, or whatever. I should do one that just focuses on the LA scene. But it died early 80s. A lot of the musicians went on to other projects and stuff like that, but it really started picking up with the Poptopia thing. I think that there were bands in the 90s that were playing, all of a sudden people were interested, they didn't want to hear grunge anymore. They wanted to hear short, snappy songs with great hooks. So you're having bands like Martin Luther Lennon, Wonder Boy, the Wonderments, I'm sorry.
Yeah, don't make that mistake. He corrected me on that before, John.
Yeah. The Negro Problem. These are all bands that they all were playing something similar, and they were all crossing paths, and all of a sudden this whole Poptopia movement came up. And that was super special. I remember I was living in Oregon at the time, and I came down for the first one, I think. At least the one that Michael Carpenter was at. So, you had people flying in from different countries.
Everywhere.
Yeah.
Sweden, Japan.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, everywhere.
I remember going to the park and seeing the Japanese band, the Oranges, and they were all dressed in almost like Bay City Roller outfits. And then there'd be a song they'd go like, "Scootering," and it was just incredible. I love them.
Remember their drummer? Their drummer's name was P, and he spelled it P-E-E, and they all wore different color uniforms, and his was yellow. And I think somebody must have told him at some point it's not a good thing, because the second album it was P-E-A. He had changed this.
But yeah, they're a really fun band because they were like glammy power pop. And then somewhere, I think Poptopia was around for about, was it 3 or 4 years?
3 or 4.
And then David Bash started up IPO, which was happening at a different time of year. And unfortunately, that was, and this had nothing to do with David Bash or the people that started Poptopia, but people were starting to realize that this exciting scene that was going on, there weren't many artists getting signed. Mm. They were bringing in fans, but the labels were still going, power pop? Ew, power poop. And the labels weren't that interested. I think was there a band like American Suitcase or something like that?
Yeah.
And I think they almost got signed.
Yeah, they were from Norway.
Yeah.
And then, and this is kind of weird. I saw a band at IPO, I think 99 or 2000. I forget the venue, somewhere up in LA. And they were a good pop band. They had one album that came out. They were called Kara's Flowers.
Yes.
And not too long after that, they figured out this pop thing is not really going anywhere. They kind of retooled everything and showed up again as Maroon 5.
Yep.
Which was kind of they started out as a pop band.
They were then, and they played IPO, didn't they?
Yeah.
IPO or Poptopia, yeah.
Was what's his name in the band?
Yes.
Yeah.
How were they when they were in that particular?
Kara's Flowers, the album's good. There's, you can probably get the
What
CD
is it
really
called
cheap.
again?
The group is called Kara's Flowers.
Kara apostrophe S Flowers.
And it's probably still pretty cheap because I remember
There it is.
yeah.
Oh, there they are. Yeah.
Yeah, but they've always had that sort of pop leaning. There was back in 2014, the 50th anniversary of the Beatles on the Ed Sullivan Show. They had a thing in the LA Convention Center, the Salute to the Beatles. And they had all these people playing Beatles songs live in front of this audience, and it was a TV special.
So they have
And like Stevie Wonder and Jeff Lynne, whoever. Maroon 5 came out and did a couple of Beatles songs, and they sounded great.
Yeah.
You really still hear that influence.
Yeah, they had 2 records out. We Like Digging and The Fourth World. One was on so many records in 94, and then they had the album on reprise in 97.
Yeah, the first one I remember as being pretty good.
Yeah.
The first album?
Mm-hmm.
Well, whatever the one that was on a major label was the one that I heard.
The Fourth World.
Yeah, that was the one.
I'm looking at it.
Got some good stuff on it.
I've never heard. There's plenty of them for sale. Look at Adam Lambert. Look at those guys. They almost look kind
It's
of
not Adam Lambert. It's Adam something or other.
What did I say? Adam.
You said Adam Lambert.
Who's
That's
that?
the guy who's in Queen. He was Adam Marsland.
Adam
Yeah,
Levine.
it's with an L. Whatever.
Adam Levine is who you're talking about.
Yeah, Adam
So
Levine.
is that if you guys would rate Kara's Flowers out of 5, what would you give it?
I haven't heard it in so long. I say 3.
Yeah, I'd say 3 because I haven't listened to it in so long. But I still have it, which speaks to something. Because if I didn't like it, I would have sold it long ago.
See, and another band that came out sort of in that time period was the Tories, and I was sure that the Tories were going to. They had that sound that was just commercial enough to make them radio friendly, but it also had all the earmarks of a power pop band. If they had maybe produced it a little bit different, maybe less gloss, it would have been, people would have totally dug them as a power pop band. But that's a group that I'm surprised didn't hit big.
Yeah, they actually had, they performed the theme song for an NBC sitcom called Jessie,
Yes.
which starred Christina Applegate.
Mm-hmm.
And the song was great.
Mm-hmm.
And then they had their first album called Wonderful Life. It was on a major label.
Mm-hmm.
And it didn't sell anything, but it was great. It was a great record. There's a song on there called Not What It Appears.
There's also
It's
Gladys
total-
Kravitz.
A total Beatles song. I mean,
Yeah, yeah.
The last chord it sounds like She Loves You or something. It's just an amazing tune.
Yeah. And there was a second Tories album, and then the singer put out at least one solo album. I mean, I've got them somewhere. I have to reload them into my system.
Steve Bertrand was the lead singer. Yeah.
And really solid stuff. But I think now they're not from LA, but I did see them twice in LA, maybe even 3 times. One of the greatest power pop bands of the later time period. We're talking, let's call it, there's the new wave era, which is the 2020 Plimsoll, stuff like that, which is still my favorite era.
Mm-hmm.
But let's call this the Poptopia IPO era. One of the greatest power pop bands ever who walked the face of the earth that I felt were commercial enough and had the power to become one of a super popular band was Splitsville.
Yeah.
Incredible band. And they've just finished a new album.
Yeah.
Looking them up.
Yeah. Great band. They actually came from
Oh,
The Greenberry
a band called
Woods.
The Greenberry Woods, who had 2 really good albums on Sire Records.
Mm-hmm.
Those are both worth looking up too. Yeah, amazing band. But so many bands from that era, the late 90s, early 2000s.
Mhm.
Mike Giblin's band and Steve Ward's band, Cherry Twister.
Oh my
Another
God.
amazing band with so many good records.
Splitsville looks like they put out 5 albums. First album came out in 96. Last one was in 2003.
The first album is more like an album that they just knocked off, kind of like just for fun. So it's not really representative of their second album, which is
Ultrasound.
Ultrasound. That's the album that is going to blow your mind.
Yeah.
The Huseman brothers are incredibly talented, and then they have Paul, and I don't know how to pronounce his last name, Krzyzak, or
Yeah, Krzyzak.
and three incredible singer, songwriter, musicians.
All right.
And
Also, if you're into the Beach Boys or the '60s
A
sound,
little bit.
there's an album called Pet Soul.
Oh,
Oh my
yeah, I
God.
see that.
Amazing. There's a song on there I listen to a lot called Tuesday Through Saturday, and it's
Yeah, that
basically
came
a
out
re-
in
it's basically a
2001.
rewrite of Walk Away Renee, but it's just beautiful. I love it.
Looking
This
at
has
it
been-
right now.
this is an incredible band. And I mean, I did like a CD junkie about a year or two ago on Splitsville. I wrote something for the Power Pop Hall of Fame website. I mean, I love this band. I think if you think of, like, in my opinion, the greatest bands, or some of the greatest bands, because there's so many great ones, but some of the greatest bands of the new wave era, like I just denoted a little while ago, would be the Rubinoos, or my favorites: Rubinoos, The Beat, Paul Collins' Beat, 2020, Shoes. These are and then from the Poptopia IPO years, Splitsville is always the top of my list. Lots of great bands after that, but Splitsville will always be. I think they're equal. They don't sound anything like, but they're equal to the greatness of, like, the Rubinoos and 2020 and The Beat.
Wow.
My opinion.
That Splitsville, I put it in my. I'm getting ultrasound, but I just looked up the complete
Pet
Pet
Soul?
Soul. Now,
Uh-huh.
that was only released in Spain and Japan.
No.
What?
It was released
Original.
here.
Yeah.
The EP was released here. Well, no. The complete Pet Soul was released on Big Deal over here.
I see it come up on Airmail and Houston Party Records.
Okay, Airmail is a Japanese label. I can't believe that they wouldn't list.
Can't remember.
I thought it came out on Big Deal. I know Big Deal put out that first EP. That was
There's
kind of like
nothing on Discogs on Big Deal.
well, how much is the one on Airmail?
Oh.
It might even have bonus tracks.
Excuse
Well,
me
I'm
just
just
one second, guys. Talk
Okay.
amongst yourselves. I'll be right back.
Okay.
Well, there's a copy in Greece. It's $46. The
Ah.
cheapest, it's $60. Yeah, you can't even buy it. It's not even worth buying. Just too much money. But
While
what
you're
other-
looking,
Go ahead.
after we get off, I'll look to see if I can find it elsewhere.
Yeah, but we've been over an hour. We're going to have to wrap it up.
Yeah, we'll wait till John gets back.
I know. What other albums by Splitsville are worth getting? Repeater, Incorporated. Do you know those records?
Yeah. Oh, I love them. I mean, I love this band. Now, the thing about the complete Pet Soul is that look under compilations and see if maybe the complete Pet Soul, maybe there's
Oh, I see what you're saying. They've got the best of Splitsville
which is a
and
great
bulk
comp.
rate Splitsville 97 to 2000 on Airmail.
Right. Okay.
Now, there are only two albums that came out. There are three albums that came out on Big Deal, and Presents the Complete Pet Soul wasn't one of them.
That's interesting.
Houston Party Records.
But the first album, like I said, would be the last one to get. The very first album. So
Right.
like start with. Now I'm not saying it's a bad record, but it's more like a garagey record. It's not that sound, you know. So their sound is more like almost like a buzzsaw blast. Great hooks. Both Matt and Brant Huseman, who are twin brothers, incredibly talented. Like I said, sometimes there are things that make me cry. Just
Really?
randomly, I'll be
Jesus.
in a sword fight somewhere, or I'll be tumbling down a hill or whatever, and I'll
Exactly.
start crying because the Huseman brothers deserve to be superstars, and they're not.
All right.
And I can't understand why.
Well, you
I-
can say that about so many of the bands we've been talking about.
Yeah.
You know,
It's-
you just kind of
yeah.
shake your head and wonder. I mean, one of my favorites from the late '80s, and we didn't really talk about that era, is the whole. And they're from Australia, and it's kind of Stems, Some Loves, DM3, that whole axis. But DM3,
Don Mariani,
in
super
particular-
talented.
Yeah, DM3 in particular, They never put out a bad album. Just so much
One
great
time,
power
two
pop.
greatest power pop songs
What
ever.
do you think of? Did we ever talk about Rooney, John? I can't remember. I love those Rooney.
Yeah, it's funny. They're back together. I saw them open for Electric Light Orchestra late last year,
How were they?
and it was funny because my daughter and I are at the show. Rooney's playing, one of their songs. I think might have been a new song,
Mhm.
and all of a sudden the place just goes nuts in the middle of the song, and I'm thinking, what's going on? I mean, it's a good song, but
Was
they're in
it
the
that
middle of it,
good?
and there's nothing special going on here. And then I remembered, oh, the Dodgers are in the World Series. Freddie Freeman had just hit a home run to win Game 1 of the World Series. I'm sure Rooney thought it was all for them, but not exactly. But they sounded good.
Yeah.
They're a good band.
Awesome. Well, gentlemen, we probably should wrap this dog up since we've went over an hour. I mean, we can
Yeah.
always have a part 2 down the road.
It started with
I'm not
LA
sure
Power
what I'm
Pop in
gonna
the late
call this.
70s. No, just call it Power Pop Chat or John Borack Ruins Everything.
I think that's what I'll call it.
Yeah.
I'm going to put
Wouldn't be
John
the first
Borack.
one.
John Borack's the man.
No, call it John Borack Saves the World.
I like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, well, I don't know. Hopefully, anybody watching this, maybe, these guys, I can't even compete with these two gentlemen on the level that they are. I am just a talk show host. And there's so much that I've written down and gathered from just them talking. I'm amazed. So hopefully everybody watching this,
Grant, remember to do this.
that's what I did.
Okay.
Hopefully you've all got something out of this, and let us know below. What do we got?
Steve, do you remember this?
Oh, I remember that. My buddy Jim made that.
Nonstop Power Pop Party.
Yes.
And what's on it?
Sale.
What was that?
I bought it at a garage sale. The guy who owned Middle Earth, Tim.
Yes.
Middle Earth Records. Yeah. So 2020 is on here. Plimsolls, Now, they're on here. The Beat, Let Me Into Your Life. So that's kind of a nice tie-in. A lot of LA bands on here.
I'm fairly certain I put together that compilation and my buddy Jim did the artwork.
It looks
And
like
like-
a Steve
and
Schnee
like we-
production.
And we made like 3 copies or 5 copies.
And then
And the
we
first,
found one used.
Yeah.
I did. The first song on here is a song I remember specifically because when I first met you, Steve, Digital Ear,
Which is many years ago, about
Many
3
years ago,
decades,
30
35 years.
30 some years. Jeez. You had told me about this band and the EP, and I bought it that day at Digital Ear. It's a band called Ouch.
Yes, I Need You More.
Yeah, that's the lead off track on here.
I put that together. There's no doubt about that.
Yep.
Yeah. So, but yeah, you know what? John and I see. John lives about how many miles? 10 miles from me,
About 12, yeah.
and we see each other once every 2 years.
You guys are
No,
tight
no.
knit.
We're going to see each other twice in 2 days. You'll be sick of me by then, trust me.
No, that's cool. Oh, we got go through your stuff and find something to trade for those 2
I'll have to look.
text me stuff.
I don't have much to trade, but I'll see what I have.
Yeah.
We're just making a deal here in the middle of the show here, Grant. Don't.
Yeah, exactly.
John, I've been listening to that Hudson Brothers CD nonstop. I just got a copy of it finally.
The
Dang,
first
I
one,
love that.
well,
No, that comp. Oh, Steve, what label did that come off?
Very Saraband.
oh yeah, that's great.
I'm thinking
It is.
about doing a show on it.
But I will say I'm going to do an episode on my CD Junkie, and I just told Grant about this today.
Of what?
John, you're probably familiar with it. Fickle Pickle.
Oh yeah. Oh, I already ordered that.
Never heard it. Who's,
Okay,
Oh,
let me
wait.
tell you real briefly. When
Go
I
ahead.
heard back in the day when I saw the name Fickle Pickle, I thought they were going to be like Toe Jam, Fat Mattress, these kind of blues rock, get stoned and enjoy them. No, this is like came out 71 or something. It's like Badfinger, The Move, ELO,
Wow.
all the stuff mixed together. Now
Wait,
this,
let me pretend to write it down.
Okay.
What was it this
Nope.
that I do?
It's you got to get the right angle.
yeah, there you go. This is the original 3 CD set that came out. It's the whole album plus bonus track singles, plus a whole disc of like unreleased stuff or non-album tracks, and then a whole disc of like studio rehearsal type thing for a show or whatever. And it's all early 70s. It's incredible. The Kinks are in there too. I mean, the sound of the Kinks. One of the guys from the Orange Bicycle was in the band. It was more like a studio band than a live band. And since McCartney didn't release Maybe I'm Amazed, they went ahead and they recorded their version and put it out as a single at that time. So 1970, 71. And I'm listening to Radio Days a lot lately.
Oh, good band.
Yeah.
Very good band. I think they were in that book that you haven't read. Somewhere.
Yeah.
Actually,
I guess I'll never find out.
Do you
They have
ever?
some-
Sorry.
Go ahead.
No,
Go ahead.
the book that Steve hasn't read. Do you ever touch on Hudson Brothers at all in that book?
I think I did in the first book because there were 2 different volumes, 2 different top 200 lists, but I don't think they were in the second one. They were in the first one.
I'm so
but
into it.
There
right
may
now.
be some more news on that book coming soon.
Oh, good.
Maybe,
Excellent.
yeah, something I can't talk about publicly, but I can tell you guys when we're off.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I already tried to wrap up the show once, and it kept going. But I'm going to wrap it up now. I want to thank these 2 gentlemen. We may do this again in a month or something. Talk
Page
Power Pop.
322.
Okay, here we go.
Subtitled Rarities and Singles, 1989 to 2015. No, I was just going to read from his book. It's the Bible of Power Pop.
Yeah, I need
Thank
to
you,
get
my
that.
son.
But yeah. Thank you, John. All right, everybody. I'm just going to wrap it up. We'll see and let us know in the comments. Give us some Power Pop songs that you like. Let us know. And please subscribe. Please do that. And subscribe to Steve's channel, by the way. John, you don't have a channel, do you?
I don't have a channel. I have a column on goldminemag.com, Goldmine Magazine, where I review Power Pop and Power Pop adjacent stuff. There's a new column up there now, actually.
Go and
So,
check that out, ladies and gentlemen.
And I'm going to be doing, I know you're trying to wrap this up, but
I know, it's all right. We're
doing another column about bands that weren't Power Pop bands that had that 1 or 2 great Power Pop songs. So we'll be talking
Don't put
about
Kiss on that.
Never, ever, ever would they appear. Anyway, so look for that coming soon.
okay. Excellent. All right, everybody. We'll see you. Gentlemen, have a good night. I'm going to get this. Won't take any editing to put this up. We'll
Yeah.
see you. All right, gentlemen. Bye.
Night.
Thanks, everybody.